I still remember the moment when the truth slipped quietly into my heart, like a soft but painful whisper. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was not even something anyone else in the room would have noticed. But I felt it deep inside me, the way a mother feels everything connected to her child. That day, Saad walked past me in the hallway without hearing my voice. I called his name gently. I said it the way I have said it all my life, with softness, with love, and with a habit that felt older than time. But he did not turn. He kept walking, distracted, tired, and lost in his own world. For a moment, I thought he simply did not hear me. That is what I always told myself. That is what mothers do. Give excuses to protect their own hearts. But something inside me knew the truth. Something inside me understood that life had moved forward. Something inside me realized my son had changed in a way I had not prepared my heart for. And in that quiet hallway, with the evening light stretching across the floor, I felt the first sting of a loneliness I could not put into words. It wasn't one moment that broke me, but the slow collection of many moments that led up to that day. Small signs that I pushed aside. Small shifts that I told myself were normal, natural, expected. After all, sons grow up. Sons build their own homes. Sons become husbands. And new priorities take shape in their hearts. I always believed I was ready for that. I told myself I would be the strong, understanding mother who stepped back with grace. But grace is easier to speak of than to practice. Especially when you have held someone in your arms from the moment they existed. Especially when you carried their fears, wiped their tears, and whispered encouragements into their darkest nights. Saad had been my little boy for so long. My gentle child. My late-night companion. My morning joy. And somewhere along the way, he became a man I loved deeply but did not fully recognize anymore. That afternoon, as I watched him laugh at something Sanaa said, I felt both happiness and a sharp ache inside me. Sanaa was kind, soft-spoken, respectful in her own way. But she loved Saad with a possessiveness that made me quietly step back each day. Not because she asked me to. Not because Saad pushed me away. But because I started feeling like my presence was becoming an intrusion instead of a comfort. I never imagined I would feel like a guest in my own child's life. I never imagined my voice would become something he could walk past without noticing. I never imagined motherhood would shift from closeness to distance so quietly. And when that moment happened, when he passed me in the hallway without hearing my call, I realized something painful. It was not rejection. And it was not deliberate. It was simply life moving forward. But I was standing still, holding memories in my hands that no longer fit into his new world. I smiled that day, even though my heart trembled. I looked at Saad and Sanaa with a quiet acceptance that surprised even me. Maybe Sanaa sensed something in my eyes, because she held Saad's arm a little tighter. She had always been protective of her space, protective of her role, protective of her place in his heart. And Saad, without knowing, had given her all of it. I don't blame him. Love does that to people. It rearranges their priorities, their focus, their entire world. But I stood there, feeling like a frame that once held a beautiful picture but had now been placed on a shelf slightly out of reach. Not forgotten but no longer needed. That was the day I understood that my son was not my little boy anymore. He had moved into a different chapter. A chapter where my voice no longer guided him. A chapter where my advice was optional. A chapter where I existed quietly at the edges. And yet, even with all the sadness pressing into my chest, there was love. A mother's love is strange. It hurts and heals at the same time. It bends but it does not break. Cries but it never stops giving. I held on to that love as I watched Saad and Sanaa walk toward the living room. I stood alone for a few seconds, letting the silence settle around me. That silence felt different. It felt like a message, a soft reminder that I had to learn a new way of loving my son. A way that did not involve constant closeness. A way that did not rely on being needed. A way that allowed him to step forward even if it meant I had to step back. And in that stillness, I finally whispered something to myself. A truth I was now ready to face. My son doesn't need his mother the way he used to anymore. Saying it hurt. But understanding it was the beginning of everything. I remember standing there in the doorway, my hand resting on the wooden frame as if it could steady the shaking inside me. The house felt different that day. Quieter, colder, almost like it had already accepted something I was still trying to understand. Saad, my son, was sitting on the sofa with his phone in his hand, and Sana, my daughter-in-law, was standing a few steps behind him. Their voices were low, but hearts hear things before ears do. And my heart heard everything. It heard the distance, it heard the hesitance, it heard the moment a mother becomes a guest inside her own child's life. I called out his name softly. Saad's son. But he didn't look up, not even a small glance, not even the tiny half-smile he always used to give me, the smile that said, "I hear you, Mom." Instead, he kept scrolling, tapping, reading something that suddenly seemed more important than the woman who had raised him with every breath she had. I told myself, maybe he didn't hear me. Maybe he's tired. Maybe it's just a moment. Just a moment. We mothers are experts at creating excuses for the children we love. But the moment stretched, and stretched, and stretched, until it broke something inside me. I tried again. "Saad, should I make tea for you both?" Still nothing. It was Sana who answered, not with harshness, but with a softness that somehow hurt more. "Mom, he's busy. You should rest. Don't worry about tea." Rest. A word people tell you when they want you to step back. A word that sounds gentle but pushes you away like a closed door. I smiled, because mothers do that. We smile even when something inside us quietly folds into itself. But the truth was simple and sharp. My voice no longer reached him. Not his ears. Not his heart. Not today. And that was the moment. The exact moment. Something inside me whispered a truth I wasn't ready to hear. Your son doesn't need you the way he once did. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of them. Some pain asks for silence, not tears. I just turned slightly, pretending I had forgotten something in the kitchen, pretending I wasn't breaking. As I walked away, the sound of my slippers against the floor felt louder than his silence. The house echoed with memories. His childhood laughter, the sound of small feet running, the way he used to call Mom from the other room as if I was his entire world. But today he didn't hear me at all. And that was when I knew. When I look back now, I realize that my whole life had once revolved around my son, Saad. He was my only child, and from the moment I first held him, I felt a bond so deep that I believed nothing in this world could ever loosen it. I raised him as a single mother for many years, because my husband passed away when Saad was still young. In those days it was just the two of us learning life together, one small step at a time. I worked long hours as a school receptionist, but no matter how tired I was, I always found energy when I saw his smile. We used to spend evenings sitting near the kitchen window, sharing stories, dreams, and small jokes only we understood. Even after he grew older, he often said, "Mom, no one understands me like you do." Those words stayed in my heart like warm sunlight. He grew into a quiet, gentle young man, respectful and thoughtful. When he finished his studies and began working, I felt a strange mixture of pride and loneliness settling inside my chest. Life was changing around us, yet I somehow hoped that our bond would remain untouched. Then came the day he introduced me to Sana, the woman he wanted to marry. She was polite, soft-spoken, and carried herself with a kind of grace that made me think she would bring peace into our home. I welcomed her with open arms, believing she would become the daughter I never had. In the early days, she often sat with me in the kitchen as I cooked, asking about old family recipes and traditions. I told myself that this new chapter would be beautiful for all of us. But a small part of me also feared something quietly, something I tried hard to push away. I wondered how much space I should give them, how much presence was too much, and when a mother should step back. I reminded myself that love grows when we loosen our grip, not when we hold tighter. With this thought, I prepared my heart for a new kind of life, one where I would no longer be the center of Saad's world, but still remain a part of it in a gentle, respectful way. I remember the early years with Saad so clearly, as if they happened only yesterday. He was a quiet boy, gentle in everything he did, and he always stayed close to me. Even when he grew older, He would still sit in the kitchen while I cooked, telling me about his day with patience and softness. Sometimes he would stop talking halfway just to ask, "Mom, are you listening?" And I would smile and say, "I am always listening." Those moments felt like small pieces of happiness saved inside my heart. I never imagined they would one day turn into memories I would hold tightly because I had nothing else left. When he married Sanaa, I tried to welcome her with open arms, hoping she would feel like a daughter to me. She was polite in the beginning, almost too polite, as if measuring each word before she let it slip. I didn't mind. New relationships need time. I told myself she just needed to feel safe. I told myself she would grow close to us the way daughters do. But I did not know that life sometimes grows quiet before it grows distant. At first, everything seemed normal, the way new marriages always feel, full of gentle adjustments and soft hopes. Saad would call me every morning, asking if I had eaten or if I needed anything from the market. He would stop by on his way home from work, even if only for a few minutes. I tried not to depend too much on these visits, but a mother's heart does not know how to measure love. Each time he walked into the house, it felt like light had entered with him. Sanaa visited with him at times, sitting beside him silently while he talked. She would smile politely, but her eyes would not rest on me for long. Still, I told myself she was only shy. I wanted to believe we just needed more time to become a family. But slowly, very slowly, a quiet space began forming, one I could feel but could not yet understand. There were days Saad stopped by without Sanaa, and each time I asked about her, he would smile and say she was tired or busy. I accepted his answer with grace, not wanting to create any pressure. My heart wanted to trust her, wanted to believe she had no reason to dislike me. I had never interfered, never offered advice unless it was asked for. I simply wished to be part of their life, even if just in small ways. But Sanaa's distance remained, and her polite smiles grew shorter with each meeting. I noticed these things the way a mother notices when the weather is changing, quietly but certainly. Still, I kept believing time would soften everything. I kept believing kindness would build a bridge between us. I had no idea that the bridge would soon feel like it was only holding from my side. Even then, I tried to stay hopeful. Kept Remy. Even then, I tried to stay hopeful. I kept reminding myself that every home has its own rhythm, and every new relationship has to find its place slowly. When Saad would talk, I would listen with all my heart, just happy to hear his voice. Whenever he left, I would pray for his happiness and for Sanaa's comfort, hoping their home would be filled with peace. I believed that love does not disappear. It only adjusts and changes shape. But some evenings when I sat alone in my room, a small whisper would pass through my thoughts. Something is shifting. I pushed the thought away each time, afraid of what it might mean. After all, a mother does not want to imagine the day her child's footsteps begin to walk farther from her. Yet that day was coming quietly, one small change at a time, preparing a truth I was not ready to face. I remember one evening when I walked into the living room and found Saad and Sanaa sitting together, whispering softly. Their heads were close, their smiles gentle, the kind of private moment a married couple naturally shares. I didn't want to disturb them, so I quietly turned around, but before I could leave, Sanaa looked up and stopped smiling. Saad followed her gaze and saw me standing there, and for a moment, I hoped he would call me over as he always used to. But he didn't. He simply adjusted himself on the sofa and gave me a small, polite smile, the kind you give a stranger who accidentally walks into the wrong room. Something inside me tightened. I walked back to my room slowly, telling myself not to overthink. Maybe they were just tired. Maybe they needed time alone. Maybe I was being too sensitive. I kept repeating these things, like a mother trying to calm her own worried heart. But the silence between us grew heavier in the days that followed. Little things started changing. Saad stopped asking me if I had eaten. He stopped checking if I needed anything from the market. He even stopped bringing me jasmine tea in the evening, something he had done since he was a teenager. Instead, Sanaa's voice filled more of the home, soft, respectful, but always watchful. One afternoon, I heard her say quietly to Saad, She is always around. I just want some space. Her words were not harsh. They were not loud. They were not meant to hurt me. But they did. They slipped into my heart like cold water, and suddenly everything made sense. The whispers, distance, polite smiles. I sat down on the edge of my bed and rested my hands in my lap. I told myself to breathe slowly, to stay calm, to remember that change is natural. But I could not stop the ache that spread across my chest. It felt like watching my son walk down a long hallway, moving farther and farther away from me, and knowing I could not call him back, not without feeling like a burden. That was the moment when I began to realize the truth, even before the big turning point arrived. My son was gently stepping out of the circle where I had once been the center. And I didn't know how to tell him that I was quietly breaking. I remember one afternoon when the house was especially quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breathing. Saad had gone to work early that morning, and Sana was in the living room folding clothes. I walked in with a small smile, carrying a plate of fresh pakoras I had made, thinking maybe we could sit together for tea. I had missed simple moments like that, the shared silence between two women who live under one roof. But as soon as I entered, I noticed how her smile faded just a little, how her hands kept working faster, like my presence made her uncomfortable. I tried to ignore the feeling in my chest and placed the plate on the table, saying softly, "I made these for all of us." She nodded politely, but her eyes didn't lift, and she said in a low voice, "Thank you, Mom. I'll let Saad know." I found myself waiting for her to add something more, maybe a suggestion that we eat together. But nothing came, and the silence stretched between us like a thin, fragile thread. Later that day, I tried again to bring us closer. I asked her if she wanted help with dinner, but she said she had everything under control. There was no anger in her voice, no harshness, only distance. Quiet wall. I watched her from the doorway as she cooked, moving quickly, neatly, almost like she didn't want anyone slowing her down. It hurt more than I expected. I had once imagined that when my son married, his wife and I would work together in the kitchen, laughing over the noise of pans and spices, sharing recipes and stories. But here we were, living side by side like strangers, gently stepping around each other. That evening, when Saad returned home, I felt a little spark of joy rise in me. I always did. He walked in, tired but smiling, and I greeted him with a warm, "Greetings, son." He answered politely but distractedly, already turning to Sana to ask about dinner. I noticed his eyes didn't linger on me the way they used to when he wanted to talk, or share his day, or sit for a moment of peace. I reminded myself that he had a long day at work, that he must be exhausted, but a small part of me whispered that maybe it wasn't only work. Maybe he was slowly drifting, step by step, without realizing I was still standing right there. The real shift began with smaller things, tiny moments that looked harmless on the surface but carried weight inside my heart. Like when I called him from the hallway and he didn't hear me the first time. Or when he was sitting with Sana and I approached them, and the conversation suddenly softened, as if my presence required a pause. Or when Sana would sometimes say, "Saad is tired today," before he even spoke for himself. None of these moments were wrong. They were normal, everyday things. But they became threads that tied together into something larger, something quieter, something that made me feel like I was slowly becoming a visitor in my own son's life. One afternoon, I overheard them talking in the bedroom. I didn't mean to. I was passing by when I heard my name. Sana's voice was low, and Saad answered even lower. Froze. It wasn't because they were speaking badly about me, at least not directly. It was because Sana said softly, "I think Mom wants to be too involved. I feel like I can't breathe sometimes." And Saad replied, "She just wants to help," but his voice held uncertainty, the kind that told me he wasn't fully sure of his own words. I stepped away quickly before I heard anything more. My heart was pounding, and I felt embarrassed for reasons I couldn't fully explain. I wasn't angry, just wounded. After that evening, the distance grew in invisible ways. Sana began choosing Saad's clothes without asking my input, even though he used to ask me before every big event. Saad stopped checking on me in the mornings. He used to peek into my room with a smile and say, "Mom, tea." But those mornings quietly disappeared. Now I would hear the kettle whistle in the kitchen, and I knew they were having their tea together. I tried telling myself that this is natural, that a wife deserves her husband's first moments, but a mother's heart is a strange thing. It wants to be understanding but also aches to be included. One evening at dinner, I noticed the biggest change yet. Saad and Sanaa were sitting together on one side of the table. I placed a dish near Saad and said gently, "Taste this, son. I made it just like you used to like when you were young." He nodded, but instead of tasting it, he continued his conversation with Sanaa. The moment passed so naturally that he didn't notice anything wrong. But I did. I felt the warmth inside me dim just a little, as though a small candle had flickered in a breeze. Days continued like this. Soft words, small misunderstandings, gentle silence. Nothing loud. Nothing dramatic. Just a growing distance. I could feel Saad moving closer to Sanaa, which was natural and beautiful in its own way, but at the same time, I felt him drifting away from me. Not because he wanted to hurt me, but because he didn't notice it was happening. That is the kind of heartbreak that stings the deepest, the kind no one means to cause. And the worst part was this. I didn't know how to talk about it. How do you tell your own son that his happiness feels like your loneliness? How do you say, "Please don't forget me," without sounding selfish? I stayed quiet, swallowing my words like bitter medicine, telling myself over and over that everything would settle with time. But time didn't settle things. Time only revealed what was coming. The rising conflict had already begun. I could feel the change tightening around me, preparing the ground for a moment that would break something inside me. I didn't know when it would happen. I didn't know how. But I could feel the storm forming silently, the air getting heavier with unspoken words, and the distance stretching just enough to hurt, but not enough to break. Not yet. I remember the day everything changed. Not loudly. Not suddenly. Not with a fight or a storm or a raised voice. It happened quietly. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like a truth settling into your bones before your mind even understands it. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where sunlight comes in through the curtains like soft gold. I had baked soda cake, the kind Saad loved since he was a boy. I wrapped it carefully, thinking he would smile the same way he used to when he took his first bite. I told myself, "He will sit with me today. We will talk. Maybe even laugh the way we once did." I held on to that hope like a little child holding a fragile balloon. When I reached their house, Sanaa opened the door. She didn't smile. She didn't even pretend to. Her voice was flat when she said, "Auntie, he's busy. He has a lot on his mind." I nodded, though my heart dipped a little. "I only brought something for him," I whispered. Sanaa stepped aside, but not in a welcoming way. It felt like she was allowing a guest she didn't want inside. I walked in slowly, my fingers tightening around the warm container. I could hear Saad's voice from the other room, soft, calm, but not the way he spoke to me. It was the voice he used with colleagues, with strangers. I waited in the living room, expecting him to step out and greet me. He didn't. After a minute I called gently, "Saad, son, I'm here." No answer. Felt strange. Unnatural, like someone hitting pause on a moment that used to flow so easily. I tried again, a little louder, "Saad." Still nothing. Sanaa walked past me, her expression unreadable, and said, "He's on a call." He said not to disturb him. The words stung more than they should have. Not because he was busy, but because he never told me not to disturb him. Never. Not even once in all the years of scraped knees, late-night fevers, exam worries, heartbreaks, or silent tears. I was always allowed into his space. Always. But that day I felt the shift. Like a door had quietly closed, and I was standing outside it without a key. I waited for him to finish. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then 15. Finally he stepped out. My entire heart softened just seeing him, and with a small hopeful smile I said softly, "Son, I brought your favorite cake." He didn't look annoyed, he didn't look happy either, he looked distant, like someone standing on the other side of a long hallway. "Oh, thanks, Mom," he said, barely glancing at the box. Then, almost immediately, he looked at Sanaa, as if searching for her approval before he looked at me again. That little glance, that tiny, quick, almost invisible glance, broke something inside me. Because he had never needed permission before. Not to smile at me. Not to talk to me. Not to love me. I placed the cake on the table gently. I wanted to say more. I wanted to ask, "Are you okay?" I wanted to ask, "Did I do something wrong?" I wanted to ask, "Do I still matter to you?" But before I could speak, Sanaa stepped closer to him and whispered something in his ear. She did it softly, subtly, but her eyes were on me the entire time. After she finished, he nodded. The kind of nod people give when they're agreeing to something they haven't thought about. Then he said it. "Mom, maybe next time call before coming. It's easier for us." The room went completely still. Time didn't stop, it just stopped making sense. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Not because I was hurt, but because I was shocked by how calm the pain felt. Like it had been waiting, like it had seen this moment long before I did. I whispered, I used to come any time, son." He didn't look at me, he only shrugged slightly and said, "Things are different now." Different. Such a simple word. But it carried the weight of years. Years of love, of sacrifices, of memories, of connection. I sat there, holding my own hands, feeling the warmth from the cake fade slowly through the container. Sanaa walked past me again, tidying a cushion that didn't need tidying. And in that simple, unnecessary movement, I understood everything. This wasn't a moment. This wasn't a mood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a shift, a quiet turning of the page, a new chapter that had started without me being invited into it. He hadn't ignored my presence, he had ignored my voice. And in doing so, he had shown me something I didn't want to see. He no longer needed me the way he once did. That was the moment, the exact breath, the exact heartbeat, when I knew my son had begun a life where my place was smaller than before. Not gone. Just quieter. Winter. Like a photograph slowly losing color. I didn't cry, I didn't speak, I didn't react. I simply looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who had walked forward while I was still holding the old version of him in my heart. That was the moment I knew. That was the turning point. I still remember the sound of the clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. That slow, steady beat felt louder than my own heartbeat. I stood near the living room doorway, holding the small tray of tea I had made for Saad. My hands were not shaking, but they felt heavier than they should have, like every silent second was pressing down on them. I could see him from where I stood. He was sitting on the couch, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. His fingers pressed against his forehead. He didn't look angry, he didn't look confused, he just looked tired. And that tiredness scared me more than anger ever could. Sanaa sat on the opposite side, her arms folded, her eyes red, as if she had been crying for a long time. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't even looking at Saad. She kept her gaze fixed on the corner of the carpet, like she was afraid of something. Or maybe she was afraid of what she had done. I took a small step forward. Then stopped. Even that quiet movement felt like too much in that tense, heavy room. "Saad," I said softly, because softness was all I had left. He didn't lift his head, so I tried again. "Son, I made tea for you both." He didn't reach for it, he didn't even look in my direction. I placed the tray on the table carefully, trying not to make a sound. My heart was beating so loudly, I wondered if he could hear it. Sanaa pressed her lips together tightly, like she didn't want the moment to soften. Then Saad finally spoke, very slowly, very quietly. "Mom, we need to talk." Those words. I had heard them thousands of times in my life. But never with that tone. Never with that distance. I pulled out a chair and sat down. My legs felt weak, as if someone had quietly taken away my strength. Saad lifted his face, and when our eyes met, I knew something inside him had changed. Something that wasn't small. Something that couldn't be undone easily. He sighed a long, heavy sigh. The kind a person lets out when they have already made a decision before speaking it. "Mom," he said, You have always been there for me. But things are different now. I am married. Sana needs space. We need space. Space. A simple word. But that day it felt like a door closing between us. I nodded slowly, even though my heart didn't understand. I never tried to take anything away from you, Saad, I whispered. I only talked to you the way a mother talks to her son. That's all. Sana's eyes glistened and she cleared her throat. Saad, she's saying it like I am imagining things. I looked at her gently. I didn't want a war. I didn't want tension. I didn't want my voice to be the reason my son felt torn. Sana, daughter, I said softly. I never wanted to come between you two. If I said or did anything that made you uncomfortable, tell me. I will change it. But she didn't soften, she held her ground. And in that moment, I understood that this wasn't about an action. It wasn't about something I had said. It was something deeper, something emotional inside her that I could not reach. Saad leaned back and rubbed his face. Mom, Sana feels you are getting too involved. Too close. She feels like she cannot breathe in her own home. The words hit me like waves. Not loud waves. Quiet ones. The kind that pull you under before you realize you're drowning. I took a breath, slow, steady, careful. She thinks I am getting too close? I asked, like I needed to repeat it to believe it. Sana finally looked at me, her voice shook a little. I feel overshadowed, like Saad listens to you more. Like I am not enough. Ah, there it was. Not anger, not hatred. But fear. A quiet, fragile fear of losing space, losing voice, losing importance. And suddenly, the pain in my chest softened into understanding. I am his mother, I said softly. But you are his wife. Those two places are not the same. I could never take your place. But Sana wasn't ready to hear that. Maybe not, she whispered. But it feels like it sometimes. Saad reached for her hand. She held onto him tightly. That simple gesture, her fingers wrapped around his, told me everything I needed to know. This was the moment. The turning point. The quiet shift I had feared but never imagined would come so soon. My son needed peace with his wife. And right now, the only thing standing in the way of that peace was me. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because sometimes a mother's heart knows how to stay gentle even while breaking. Saad, I whispered. I never wanted to be a burden. He shook his head quickly. You're not a burden, Mom. But his voice was unsure. And uncertainty is often more honest than certainty. I stood up and my hands were cold, my heart felt too full, too heavy, like all the years of raising him were sitting quietly inside it. Maybe, I said slowly, it is time for me to give you both space. Real space. Not the kind created by arguments, but the kind created with love. Sana blinked. You don't have to. I do, I said gently. For both of you. Saad looked at me with startled eyes. Mom, are you leaving? I placed my hand on his shoulder, a mother's last soft touch before a quiet distance. I am not leaving your life, son, I said. Just your home for a while. That was the moment the air changed. The moment silence grew thick. The moment all three of us felt the weight of something shifting forever. The moment I realized. My son didn't need his mother the way he once did. And even though it hurt, a part of me whispered, this is how life moves. This is how love stretches without breaking. And so the turning point wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was soft, it was fragile, it was simply the moment a mother stepped back so her child could step forward. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, unsure whether to walk toward the living room or turn back to the guest room. My hands trembled slightly, the way they do when the truth becomes too heavy to hold. The voices I heard were not loud, but they carried the weight of something I had been afraid to name. It was my son Saad and his wife Sana. And they were speaking about me. I took a small step forward. Then another. The carpet under my feet felt softer than usual, almost like it was trying to cushion the blow I had not yet fully received. When I reached the edge of the wall, I paused again. Their voices were clearer now. I just want some space, Saad, Sana said softly, but with a firmness that left no room for misunderstanding. Your mother is too involved. Too close. It makes me uncomfortable. There was a long silence before Saad answered. I know. I've been thinking the same thing. Those words pierced through me more quietly than I expected. No scream. No shock. Just a quiet breaking, like thin glass cracking in the cold. I leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, trying not to let my heart rush too fast. I wanted to believe I had misheard. Maybe they meant something else. Maybe this wasn't about me. But the next words removed all doubt. She doesn't know when to step back, Sana continued. She still talks to you like you're a little boy. She forgets you're a married man now. Saad let out a heavy sigh. Yes, she does. I get tired of it. My son. My gentle, kind boy. The child who once ran into my arms at the smallest scratch. The young man who stayed awake for nights when I was sick. The one who wiped tears from my eyes after his father passed. That same boy, now tired of me. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger. Not jealousy. Just a deep, aching understanding. Maybe I had held on too tightly. Maybe I had loved him in the only way I knew. Completely, with every part of my heart. And forgot that one day he would need room to grow without me. But hearing it said aloud. Hearing that he believed I was too close. That was the moment something in me quietly unraveled. I wanted to walk into the room to explain myself gently, to tell them I never meant to overwhelm anyone. But instead I stayed where I was, allowing their words to float toward me like soft, painful truths. I think, Saad said after a long pause, we should set some boundaries. Boundaries. Such a simple word. To come. So ordinary. And yet, in that moment, it felt like a wall being built between us, brick by brick. Sana's voice softened. I'm not trying to hurt her. I just want our home to feel like ours. I understand, Saad replied. I'll talk to her. Talk to me. Those words echoed strangely. I wondered what he would say, how he would explain, whether he would soften the truth or deliver it exactly as it was spoken just now. I stepped back slightly, careful not to make a sound. I did not want them to know I had heard them. Not like this. Not while I was still trying to understand the storm inside me. I walked toward the kitchen instead. Slowly, quietly. My breath steady, my heart not so much. I pulled out a chair and sat down, placing my hands around a cup of tea that was no longer warm. I stared at the rising steam that wasn't there. The way someone looks at a memory that has already faded. When Saad walked in a moment later, he looked surprised to see me awake. Mom, you're up, he asked gently. He nodded. Yes. Couldn't sleep. He hesitated. His shoulders dropped the way they do when he's carrying something heavy. I gave him a small smile, inviting him to speak. He sat across from me. Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something. I'm listening, I said softly. He took a breath. I think maybe you're getting a little too close. I mean, too involved. Sana feels uncomfortable sometimes. And I do too. The moment the words were said directly to me, in his calm, steady voice, something inside me settled. Because it was the truth. Hurt. But it was real. And maybe it was time I accepted it. I lowered my eyes, letting the silence rest between us. Then I nodded slowly, my voice soft and steady. I understand, son. 2 simple words. But they carried a quiet goodbye. Not to him, but to the part of motherhood that refuses to step back. He exhaled with relief, not noticing the small tear that escaped from the corner of my eye. I wiped it away before he could see. That moment, the quiet moment at the kitchen table, was when I finally understood. My son didn't need me the same way anymore. And that was the turning point my heart had been fearing and preparing for all along. I remember sitting alone in my small living room, the evening light falling softly across the floor. Everything felt quieter than usual. Even the ticking clock seemed to move slower, as if my own heart had asked the world to pause. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to breathe, really breathe, for the first time in days. For so long I had been holding my breath, waiting for someone to tell me I still mattered, that I still had a place in my son's life. But the house stayed silent. And somehow, that silence began to speak to me. Told me that maybe motherhood changes, but it does not disappear. Told me that love doesn't stop just because someone moves away from you. It told me that I could still be whole, even if Saad needed space to build his own life with Sanaa. I felt a warmth rise in my chest, not painful this time, but strangely gentle, a kind of acceptance, a kind of release. I whispered to myself, maybe this is what letting go feels like. Not abandonment, but transition. The next morning I made tea for myself just the way I liked it. Light, sweet, comforting. For the first time in a long time, I didn't pour an extra cup for someone who might or might not come. I placed the cup in front of me and sat by the window. Birds were making their little morning songs. The world was moving forward even if my heart felt slow. I smiled softly. I can move forward too, I said. That afternoon I found myself cleaning the guest room. Not because someone was visiting, but because it felt like time to make room for something new. Maybe a new hobby. Maybe new memories. Maybe even new friends. Life didn't have to end just because one chapter changed. And then, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed. It was Saad. The message was simple. Mama, can we talk? My hands trembled, but my heart stayed calm. For the first time I didn't respond with desperation or fear. I simply typed back. Yes, son, whenever you're ready. There was no anger left inside me, no heavy questions, no silent begging. Just a quiet acceptance that whatever he had to say, I was strong enough to hear it now. That evening he came over. His steps were unsure, almost hesitant. But when he sat down across from me, something in his eyes looked softer. He wasn't my little boy anymore, but he wasn't a stranger either. Just a man trying to balance two worlds. He cleared his throat. Mama, I'm sorry, he said gently. I didn't realize how you felt. I didn't understand. His voice cracked a little, and I felt tears slip into my eyes. But they were warm tears, peaceful tears. It's all right, Saad, I whispered. You don't owe me the same kind of closeness you had as a child. I just needed to know I still mattered. He nodded slowly. You do, Mama. You always will. I got caught in something I didn't know how to handle. We talked for a long time. Not as mother and child holding on to the past, but as two adults learning how to build a new relationship. Point one with space. Point one with respect. Point one with understanding. When he left that night, he hugged me tighter than he had in months. And for the first time I didn't cling to him. I let the moment happen, warm and full, and then I let it go. After he left, I stood by the door, breathing in the quiet air of the house. It no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. I realized something important. I didn't need Saad to need me the way he once did. I only needed him to see me with love. And that, he still did. The rest, I could learn to live without. And that was the beginning of my healing. I remember sitting alone in my small living room that evening, the soft yellow light from the lamp falling over the empty teacup in front of me. The house felt even quieter than usual. I could hear the clock ticking, each second reminding me of how much life had already passed, and how much I still needed to accept. My heart was heavy, but there was a new kind of softness in it too, like I had finally stopped fighting something I was never meant to hold on to forever. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. Saad does not belong to me anymore, I whispered to myself, not in pain this time, but in understanding. Children are like the wind. They touch us, warm us, and then someday drift toward their own direction. My job had been to love him, raise him, guide him, not to keep him tied to me. Knowing this did not erase the hurt, but it made the hurt gentler. 2 days later, Saad called me. His voice was calm, almost relieved, as if he had finally gathered the courage to speak. Mom, I'm sorry about that night, he said. Things just felt tense. I didn't want Sanaa to feel uncomfortable. For a moment I could not speak. Hearing my son apologize, even in a small way, felt like someone placing a warm hand on an old wound. It's all right, son, I finally replied. Marriage changes many things. Understand. You don't have to explain. He hesitated. I don't want you to feel pushed away. I smiled even though he could not see me. Sometimes, I said softly. Stepping back is another way of loving. You have your life now. And Sanaa, she needs to feel secure in her home. I won't let my presence disturb that. There was a pause on the line, long, thoughtful. Mom, thank you, he whispered. I did not want gratitude. I wanted peace. And in that moment, I felt like I had given both him and myself exactly that. Later that week, Sanaa sent me a short voice note. Only 7 seconds long. Greetings, Mom. Hope you're well. Let us know if you need anything. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. It was human. And I accepted it as the beginning of something. Maybe not what I had once dreamed of, but something steady and respectful. I started giving myself time too. I watered the plants I had ignored. I cooked meals for myself without waiting to serve someone else. I opened windows and let the sunlight in, letting it touch places that had been dim for too long. Slowly, I learned how to be just myself again. Not only a mother, not only a giver, but a person with her own quiet corners and gentle needs. One evening, while folding laundry, I realized something. My pain did not come only from Saad pulling away. It came from me holding on too tightly. It came from expecting the past to remain unchanged. Sanaa and Saad visited me the following weekend. They didn't stay long, but they sat with me, drank tea, talked about small things, work, weather, chores. It was simple, but it felt like a warm patch of sunlight on a cold day. As they were leaving, Saad hugged me. It wasn't rushed this time. Mom, you're important to me. Always, he murmured. I held his hand gently. I know, son, and now I've learned something too. You can love someone without needing to be at the center of their life. His eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen in months. Sanaa smiled too. An honest, unguarded smile. And in that smile, I saw something I had been longing for. Acceptance. When they left, I didn't feel the old ache. Instead, I felt a calm settling inside me. A new chapter had begun. Not one where I was forgotten, but where I had finally learned how to stand without leaning too heavily on the past. That night, as I sat by the window watching the streetlights glow, I whispered to myself, this is motherhood. Letting go a little at a time, even when it hurts, and discovering yourself again in the space that remains. For the first time in a long while, my heart felt light. I sat by the window that evening, watching the soft light fade across the sky, and I felt a kind of quiet acceptance settle in my heart. I understood then that motherhood is not about holding on forever, but about loving enough to let go when the time comes. I thought of Saad as a little boy running toward me with open arms, and I realized those memories would always belong to me, untouched by time or distance. I knew I could not ask him to return to the past, and I could not ask his heart to remain where it no longer lived. I felt a gentle ache, but also a strange peace, like a chapter closing with the slow turn of a page. I whispered a small prayer for him, hoping he would always walk through life with warmth, kindness, and protection. I also prayed for Sanaa, because loving my son now meant loving the people he had chosen for his own journey. I remembered how life had shaped me too, how I had once been someone's daughter-in-law, learning, adjusting, fearing mistakes. That memory softened me. It reminded me that none of us are perfect. We are all just trying to find our place in someone else's story. I promised myself that if Saad ever reached for me again, even once, I would be there with open hands and a gentle smile. But if he chose not to, I would still carry him in my heart, as silently and faithfully as the moon carries the night. I realized then that a mother's love does not end when a child grows. It simply changes shape. And sometimes that change asks for courage, patience, and quiet dignity. I breathed deeply, letting the last of the sunlight rest across my face, and I allowed myself to feel proud of the love I had given. It was not perfect, but it was sincere. And as the night finally settled, I understood the truth. He may not need me in the same way anymore, but the door between our hearts will never truly close. I will always leave a small light glowing in my soul for him, just in case he finds his way back one day. I sat by the window that evening, watching the sky turn from gold to quiet blue, and I finally felt my heart settle. I understood then that loving a child meant letting them walk their own road, even when it leads away from you. Saad had grown. And though his steps no longer circled back to me the way they once did, the love I carried for him still lived untouched. I whispered a prayer for his happiness, not for my place beside him, but for his own peace. A soft calm washed over me as I realized that motherhood does not end when a child moves on. It simply changes shape. Some days it becomes distance. Some days it becomes silence. And on rare days, it becomes a quiet hope that they will remember the warmth of your voice. I closed my eyes, breathed in slowly, and allowed myself to let go without breaking. Because even if my son no longer needed his mother, I would always be grateful for the years he did.